Okay, welcome back. I hope everyone had a fine weekend. It's good to have you back. Today we're continuing our RBT exam practice series where I'm going through a full RBT exam question by question, breaking down each question, how I think you should think about them when you're taking your real exam. So if you're returning to our channel, welcome back. If you're new, welcome, happy to have you. Remember, any comments or questions, please leave them below. I'm happy to help. As always, we offer our study materials at rbtexamreview.com. We now offer 3 practice exams, a full task list study guide. The combo pack comes with everything and flashcards. And of course, we have our RBT competency study guide. So those links will be in the comments and description below. Check those out. Keep studying hard, keep working hard, and let's get into our test. Okay, 91. When would it be most appropriate to use a discontinuous measurement strategy to collect data? Okay, so we're looking for the time where we want to use discontinuous measurement. What are our 2 types of measurement? Continuous and discontinuous. Continuous, we're recording every instance of a behavior. Discontinuous, we're only capturing certain segments, certain intervals, okay? So if we're looking for the most appropriate time to use discontinuous measurement, we're going to be looking for a situation where we're only going to need to capture certain intervals, okay? Or where we're not capturing every single instance of a behavior. So A, you work with the client for 3 hours Tuesday and Thursday at their house. You're taking behavior data on screaming. In this situation, continuous measurement would be best, right? You want to know every time they scream or how long they scream for, and you're going to capture every instance of that behavior, okay? So you're not going to use discontinuous here. Continuous would be a better option. B, you work at a school and are given the responsibility to monitor the kids at lunch to ensure they're eating their meals. Okay, now in this situation, you've got more than one client or more than one student to monitor, okay? You're only monitoring at lunchtime, okay? And you're going to be monitoring at different intervals for each kid, right? You're not going to be, you can't take data on all kids at all time, right? So you're going to look at each kid at a different time. This is a good situation to use discontinuous measurement, okay? Because if you're going to use some sort of time sampling, then you don't need to be tracking every single instance of eating or not eating from every single kid, okay? Additionally, once lunch is over, you're no longer taking this data, okay? So you're discontinuously looking at meals, okay, in this lunch interval, okay, across a bunch of different kids. It's a very good time to use discontinuous measurement. So B is pretty good. Let's read all of our answer choices. C, your doctor wants to know how many times a day you feel pain in your legs. Well, in this case, your doctor wants to know every instance of the behavior, okay, or the phenomenon, which is the pain. You're recording every single time it happens, therefore it's going to be continuous. And then D, you're tracking the number of trick-or-treaters you get during Halloween. Again, it's during Halloween, but you're tracking every single trick-or-treater, okay? So continuously throughout the duration of Halloween, you're tracking every single behavior. In that case, you're going to be using continuous measurement. So B is our best answer, okay? Where you've got multiple kids, multiple students, okay? You're not tracking every instance of something happening. It's just not going to be possible with multiple kids, okay? You're discontinuously monitoring how often they're eating their lunch. Are they eating their meals? Yes or no? 92, Carol works at a marketing firm. It is her job to pick the newest promotional material for their clients. Carol wants a second opinion, so she asks her friend Dana for help. Carol places 4 different designs on the table and asks Dana which one she likes best. When Dana makes a choice, Carol removes the items Dana didn't choose and puts new items on the table, then asks her to choose again. What best describes Carol's strategy assessment? Okay. Which one best describes Carol's strategy assessment? So Carol has her friend, right? And she lays out all these items on the table. She has 4 different designs on the table, okay? And Dana chooses one. When Dana makes a choice, Carol removes the items that Dana didn't choose, puts new items back on the table, and keeps the one she chose. What type of preference assessment is that? Well, what do we ask ourselves when we're looking at preference assessments? How many items are we assessing? Are we assessing 1, 2, or more than 2? Well, in this case, it's obviously more than 2, so it's not going to be a single stimulus, which is 1. It won't be a forced choice, which is 2. It's going to be some sort of multiple stimulus. It's not natural, right? Because it's all contrived. So are we dealing with the multiple stimulus with replacement or multiple stimulus without replacement? Well, what is Dana doing? Is she replacing anything? Yes, she's replacing the items that Dana didn't choose, right? Carol takes the items Dana chose, removes them, puts new items there. This is going to be multiple stimulus with replacement, okay? Get used to applying this stuff in situations maybe outside of what you typically think of ABA, okay? All these application questions are what you're going to need to do on your exam. So even a question like that, which seems totally unrelated to autism or disabilities, okay? ABA still applies in all life situations, okay? 93, Brad's favorite food is salmon sushi. Last night, Brad went out for some sushi with his friends. Brad ended up eating 2 rolls of salmon sushi. When Brad got home, he immediately became sick with food poisoning. Now, Brad can't even handle the thought of eating salmon sushi. Food poisoning functions as what? Okay, so we're looking at some sort of reinforcement punishment question. Ask yourself first, what happened to the behavior? Did the behavior increase? Did the behavior decrease? What is the behavior? The behavior is Brad ate these 2 rolls of sushi, okay? Now he can't even think about eating salmon sushi. The behavior decreased. So we're looking at some sort of punishment. Remember, punishment decreases, reinforcement increases, okay? Now we ask ourselves, was a stimulus added or a stimulus removed as part of this punishment procedure? Well, the food poisoning came into play, okay? So the food poisoning was added. The food poisoning reduced Brad's eating sushi behavior. Therefore, what? It has to be positive punishment. If you break down reinforcement and punishment questions like that, you'll never miss them, okay? Did the behavior increase or decrease? Was a stimulus added or taken away? Ask yourself those questions. These questions become very simple. 94, burning your hand on a stove, getting wet because you forgot your umbrella, and running out of gas because you neglected filling up your tank are all examples of what? Okay, be careful here, right? Our first instinct is that these things are bad, right? Obviously, burning your hand on a stove is bad. Getting wet is not preferable, and running out of gas is definitely not preferable, okay? So we're thinking in our heads, what could these be examples of, okay? Well, they're not antecedents, right? Because all of these things come after a behavior, right? They're a result of a behavior. Antecedents come before that behavior, okay? So it can't be antecedents. So now we have consequences, punishment, and reinforcement. Well, think about it, okay? What did we just say about punishment and reinforcement? We need to know what happens to the behavior for it to qualify as punishment or reinforcement. Do we know what happens to your behavior, to this person's behavior after they burn their hand on a stove? No, we just know they burn their hand. Do we know what happens after they get wet? No, we just know they got wet. And do we know what happened after they ran out of gas? No, they just ran out of gas. We don't know what the future behavior looks like in these scenarios. We just know what happened, okay? We just know what the consequences were. And that's the difference, okay? Punishment and reinforcement are both types of consequences, okay? But we only establish something as a punishment or a reinforcement if it's changing the behavior. Without knowing what happened in the future after they burned their hand, got wet, or ran out of gas, we can't definitively say something was a punisher or something was a reinforcer, okay? So the answer here is all these are examples of consequences, okay? Burning your hand was a result of putting it on a hot stove. Getting wet was a result of forgetting your umbrella. Running out of gas was a result of neglecting to fill up the tank. These are consequences, but they're not necessarily punishments or reinforcements, okay? Important distinction, okay? Make sure you understand that concept. 95, you help your BCBA develop a task chain using a task analysis for sending an email. The first step in the chain is opening up the email application on the client's phone or computer. Whenever your client successfully does this, you provide reinforcement and then help your client through the rest of the task. You're most likely using what strategy? Okay, very simple task chaining question here, right? What are we trying to teach? We're trying to teach them to send an email. So we conducted our task analysis, broke down sending an email into steps, and now we're going to teach the steps using our task chain. Okay. First step in the chain, we open up the email application. Whenever your client does that, you reinforce, and then what? You prompted the rest of the task. This is what? Is it forward chaining, backwards chaining, total task chaining, or behavior chain interruption strategy? Well, it's pretty clearly forward chaining. What is forward chaining? Forward chaining, you teach the first step first and reinforce after they engage in the first step, promptly the rest, and then you teach the first and second step, first, second, third, on and on. You're just teaching the chain front to back in order, just like we're doing in this situation. Remember backwards chaining, we teach the last step first and reinforce for the last step. Total task chaining, we teach the whole thing, right? Because they're only missing a few skills here and there. And then behavior chain interruption strategy, we intentionally interrupt our task chain to teach a new behavior, a new response. But in this case, we are doing forward chaining, okay? We're teaching that first step first and then reinforcing. During an assessment, your supervisor is interviewing the client's mom in another room. You are in the client's room recording any relevant antecedents and consequences that you notice. What type of assessment are you conducting? Okay, so some questions we have, you're doing the interviewing or you're doing the surveys and the checklist, okay? But in this case, you're assisting in the assessment by hanging out with the client and taking some data on the client. In this case, antecedents and consequences, some sort of narrative ABC recording, okay? What are you doing? Are you indirectly assessing the client? No. Who in this situation is indirectly assessing the client? Well, your supervisor, right? The indirect assessment is any sort of assessment that doesn't actually have you or have the person conducting the assessment observing the client, okay? In this case, your supervisor is not observing a client. You're simply conducting an indirect interview. So what are you doing? Well, you're directly assessing the client. A direct assessment is involved with the client. You're observing the client. You're observing behavior. You're taking notes, data on behavior, okay? That's what you're doing in this situation, directly observing the client. Now, are you doing a reinforcer assessment? No, you're not manipulating anything. You're not looking at behavior change. You're just looking at antecedents and consequences. Same for the functional analysis. In a functional analysis, we actually manipulate antecedents and consequences to determine a function. All you're doing is recording relevant antecedents and consequences that you notice, okay, to further guide your treatment planning as you better get to know this client. So what type of assessment are you conducting? A direct assessment. Your client told you all summer how excited they were to go back to school and see all their friends. Last week, 2 of their classmates tested positive for COVID-19. The school decided to switch all learning to remote for the remainder of the semester as a result. Should you report this to your supervisor? Okay, so this is a situation where something outside of your session, outside of our scope happens, right? Something in your client's life occurs, okay? And you need to know, should I report this? Okay, should I document this? A, no, this is not measurable or observable. Okay, maybe you can measure that they're not in school, or you can observe him not going to school, but it's not necessarily something that we're going to take a bunch of data on, right? It's pretty clear cut. They're going to be remote, okay? He's no longer in school, okay? So no, this isn't really the right answer. B, no, we do not handle school-related issues. Not necessarily, okay? Even though that's not our scope, that's not our primary job, okay? As we're involved in their lives and as school is part of our client's life, depending on what client you have, okay, we will be involved in some school-related issues, okay? It's just unavoidable. So in this case, yeah, we are involved in this issue, especially during COVID-19, okay? The thing has kind of changed. C, yes, this is something that may affect the client. Absolutely, right? Most obvious answer, most common sense answer. If it's something that may affect the client, you need to tell your supervisor, you document it, okay? And then you're good, right? Your client was excited all summer. Maybe that was used as reinforcement. Maybe it was a motivation, and now that's taken away from them, okay? Think about when you were excited for something and then it was suddenly taken away from you. How does that make you feel, right? Same thing here. Although we can't predict, we can't know for sure, and we can't assume it's going to change the client or affect it, it really might, right? So since it has the possibility of affecting the client, we need to report it to our supervisor. We need to at least document it. So 97C, yes, this is something that may affect the client. Straight from the task list, report variables that might affect your client. 98, Laura was able to teach her client to write their name independently after 1 month of working on the skill. Now, Laura will randomly ask the client to write their name once or twice a week. Laura is most likely testing for what? Okay, so first part of this scenario is a teaching environment, teaching her client to write their name independently, okay? They succeed, skill is taught, right? So now they're no longer explicitly working on this skill. Now she's just randomly probing or asking the client occasionally, hey, can you write their name? What is this a classic case of? Are we generalizing anything? Are we a generalization? No, there's no sense of generalization here. It's still with Laura, okay? There's no hint of outside of any sort of environment, okay? There's not enough information to say we're generalizing. What are we doing? We're testing for maintenance, right? Maintenance is the ability for a skill to persist or remain even after learning has stopped. So even after Laura has stopped teaching her client to write their name independently, Laura still wants to know, can you do it? Laura is testing for maintenance. Think about when you learn a skill, and if you don't work on that skill for a while, what happens? It starts to go away. You want to make sure you're maintaining that skill as much as possible. That's why we run maintenance trials. In this case, Laura's running maintenance trials. We're not testing for behavior reduction, obviously. We don't want to reduce the behavior. And then we're not testing for any sort of generative learning where the client can now write in cursive, okay? Laura is simply testing for maintenance of this handwriting ability. 99, a strategy that involves providing physical prompts only as needed and then fading them out again as soon as you can is referred to as what? So yes, this is a pretty straightforward definition question, okay? But I think this one is not something that's talked about a lot. So I just want to be sure we understand the definition of this strategy. And this strategy is a physical prompting strategy that involves physical prompts and fading. Physical prompts fade. So you physically prompt as much as needed and then immediately fade out again, okay? This is graduated guidance, okay? Very specific terminology, very specific term, okay? If we're exclusively talking about providing physical prompts and fading in and out physical prompts only, it's gonna be graduated guidance, okay? So if we're talking about hand over hand prompting and then reducing that to just guiding the forearms and then just guiding the elbows, okay? That's graduated guidance. Only providing as much physical prompting as needed and then fading out again. So again, pretty straightforward question, right? It's just a definition question. But I think it's important that we cover this and make sure you understand the difference between most to least prompting and graduated guidance. With most to least prompting, physical prompting is the most prompting, but when we're doing most to least, we're going to go from physical, right, to partial, to modeling, to verbal, to gestural, right? We're using the whole array of prompts, or the whole repertoire of prompts. With graduated guidance, it's strictly a physical prompting deal where we're fading them in and out as needed. And then 100, your client is generally well behaved whenever you're working on homework with them. However, when mom comes into the room, your client will start talking loudly, standing up out of his seat, and occasionally will throw his pencil. Your client will do this until his mom acknowledges him in some way. Based on this information, this behavior is most likely maintained by what? Okay, so a hypothesis question. If they ask you to hypothesize a function of a behavior, okay, you can almost guarantee it'll be very straightforward, just like this one, okay? They're not gonna try to fool you with function questions because it is just a hypothesis. You can only go off the information given, so they're gonna provide you with good, relevant information. In this case, what do you think's happening? Is your client trying to gain access to some sort of tangible, some sort of item? Well, no, right? There's no hint of the client wanting food or entertainment or anything like that, okay? The behavior all starts when mom comes into the room, and that's the key, right? That's the antecedent. Mom walks in a room, behavior, client engages in all these behaviors. Consequence, mom acknowledges him in some way. That's how you think about it, right? That's how we get to our function. What is maintaining this behavior? What's that consequence of what? Is it automatic reinforcement? No, automatic reinforcement is reinforcement that occurs alone or without any socially mediated help. Who provides the consequence in the situation? Mom. It's not automatic. C, escape. Is your client trying to escape? That's not clear. It doesn't seem like it, right? It just doesn't seem like there's any sort of getting out of doing work, okay? Because the antecedent is mom walking into the room, okay? And when mom provides the consequence, mom acknowledges him, but she doesn't necessarily get him out of work based on our information. So based on this information, the most likely explanation is what? Mom's attention. Again, antecedent, mom comes into room. Behavior, client starts talking loudly. Consequence, mom acknowledges him in some way. D, attention. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that was helpful. Keep going over that study guide. Keep looking at the study materials. If you need those study materials, rbtexamreview.com. I've got a new series coming where we're going to start some BCBA stuff. So I know a lot of the past RBTs who have passed using our content have requested BCBA material. So we're going to start that up either this week or next week. So if you're currently an RBT or currently trying to become an RBT and want to become a BCBA, remain subscribed to this channel because BCBA content is coming soon. Okay, I'm here to help you with that as well. As always, any questions or comments, please leave them below. I'm happy to help. I'll be back next Monday with a brand new practice exam. So be on the lookout for that. Wednesday, practice questions, and Friday is either going to be BCBA stuff or ethics. So I'll talk to you soon. Keep working hard, and I'll see you soon.